Today, I want to take a look at dystopian literature and how it fits into these ideas that we've been talking about. I had you read Harrison Bergeron and The Unknown Citizen as a type of smaller elements of dystopian literature. But I want you again to be able to make the connections, right? How does this all fit into this ongoing discussion that we've been taking a look at with the Cold War in the 1950s, right? The post-war era, with the advent of the Cold War and increasing tensions with Stalinism and the Soviet Union, and fears of communism at home with McCarthyism and the Red Scare, as well as the growth of suburbs all over the United States with its uniform houses and values, saw a rise to dystopian literature. People started to feel suffocated in the monotony and blandness of the 1950s culture and suburban life. More people than before the war had access to the American dream, yet it felt rigid, too rigid and conformist. George Orwell's 1984 and Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 comment on the government's overextending itself into this new era. And Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World accurately predicts the increase of our addiction to consumerism and entertainment. Novels such as these suggest that our attempts to perfect society generally lead to too much authoritarianism and loss of individuality, much like people were experiencing during the Cold War and suburbia. So, this idea is that the United States, even though it's promoting this idea of freedom and democracy and choice, and you can do whatever you want, the underlying currents of society was you had to conform and to be like everyone else, and you had to do what everyone was doing, which was what buying, kind of going to work and going home, and being all part of this mechanism of society. And anyone that was different from this was deemed to be unusual or abnormal, was their kind of the moniker that they gave them. I want to take a look at some dystopian art. This is as close as I can get to dystopian art, but I want to take a look at George Tucker and some of his works. And we've been discussing, the differences between art and propaganda and how art tends to reflect reality, right? Trying to portray the world as it really is. Whereas propaganda tends to portray an alternate version of reality by covering up or ignoring more challenging or difficult aspects of life, kind of brushing them away. I want you to think about how Tucker's art fits into this discussion about what art is or what propaganda is, as his works border between reality and non reality. They both kind of look real, and at the same time, they don't look real. I want you to consider our discussions of the problems with a culture that emphasizes homogeny, or this idea of sameness. And I want you to think about what commentary he is making with his art. And so here you see the subway. Generally, his entities that he depicts are going to be in this kind of almost feeling reality. Here is the subway, kind of gives us a sense of a subway. But the figures generally don't interact. They're not really kind of happy. They're just kind of blandly going through life. Right? Here's standing figures. It gives us the sense of kind of they're in a locker room or something. This one is a government bureau, right? This one actually feels pretty realistic to me as far as it's kind of the way he's representing how the government functions. Or this, the waiting room, is kind of how I feel when I'm in a waiting room. But again, it kind of looks realistic, but in some ways it doesn't look realistic at the same time. Or we see with his sleepers. This one's probably the most haunting to me because all we see are these disembodied heads that are kind of floating. They're not really asleep, but are they really awake, right? It kind of is an interesting commentary. Or lunch. Here they're all kind of sitting in eating their lunch, kind of like at a crossroads. Or this one's like a landscape of figures. Feels like they're just in cubicles in their offices. So as we look through them, I want you to think about how he's depicting this idea of reality. How might this, relate to our discussion of homogeny? Or how might this relate to a discussion on dystopia, where we're trying to create this perfect society, and that's kind of what the 1950s culture is with suburbia. We want this perfect society where everyone gets along, we don't have any problems, But there's a darker element to that when you're forcing everyone to be the same, to look the same, right? And so, what might be the commentary that he's making on this particular society where people don't really interact? They're not really happy. They're just kind of mindlessly going through, right? Going through their lives, going through work, going through perhaps the university, not really knowing what they're doing. They're just told what they're supposed to study or what kind of job they're supposed to have. Their dreams aren't really creative. They just kind of go through and just are following along with what they're told, or they're waiting in life for something to happen, but it never really gets there, right? They're waiting for their dreams to be realized, but they don't really have dreams of their own. They're just kind of living in other people's dreams, or how the government tends to impose the kind of standardizations onto us, and gets us to kind of fit in these kind of single lines, and without thinking, without individuality, getting back um, to Auden's The Unknown Citizen, what the government would value and why the government would value that. But these kind of lifeless entities that just kind of go through, right? So I want you to think about Jupiter's art, and although it's reflecting this kind of non-reality, is actually perhaps in some ways in its commentary reflecting very deeply the reality that people are living on a day-to-day basis as they just kind of go through their jobs, right? So many students that I have just kind of want to hurry up through the university, get their degree so they can go to work, right? So that they can go to punch into their 9 to 5 jobs, right? But the question is, are we really living to work, or are we working to live, right? That's a kind of a question that we need to answer, right, as we go through our lives, right? What is work for us? What is our home to us, right? Is our home kind of the entity, the pinnacle of our existence? Or is it a place where we kind of just hang our head, and our life, our identity means more than our job or our car or where we live, right? And kind of the society pushes one way, but is that going to lead to our happiness, right? Just some thoughts to think about as we move forward.